Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. But let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's going to be Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio.com. Thanks for joining us, Megan, and happy birthday!
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I'm feeling older already.
Yeah, I saw some of those gifts you received on Twitter. Good stuff. Keep the booze going there for you. That's probably the best gift you can get. But we're talking Starbucks today. They report earnings after the close. I was reading through some of your notes, Megan, and I'm expecting, just the normal stuff. And then I see this medicine ball tea, and I have to start doing some digging. And the first thing I see on Google, when I Googled medicine ball tea from Starbucks, it says, this is a hoax. Make it at home yourself. What's your data showing here on Starbucks into the earnings report?
Yeah, so full disclosure, it was originally going to be Andy on the show today, and whenever we started gathering these charts, we wanted to do something a little bit different, and he said, I think maybe you better take this one. And so what we looked at is, specifically with Starbucks, we saw a nice ramp up in the last holiday season, and so we started to say, okay, what's driving this ramp in a holiday season for demand? And a lot of that was their holiday drinks, a lot of that is plant-based drinks, but then whenever we started actually looking at tweets, we kept seeing a lot of these mentions about medicine ball. I was like, what is this? And so we actually isolated that data, and you can see the significant growth and just demand for this one specific product, just as an example. And I think that really this demonstrates, not just necessarily that Starbucks is going to have an amazing quarter just because of this, this medicine ball tea, but really it's this idea that Starbucks is able to get ahead of these consumer trends. They're able to leverage these consumer trends. And, whenever we look at, especially as we kick off the new year, some of the things that are driving these New Year's resolutions that are, top of mind when it comes to consumer priorities, we see a lot of mentions about consumers who are seeking, to boost their immunity. We see a lot of mentions from consumers who are seeking food and drink products that provide these functional benefits. So, whether that's energy, whether that's immunity, whether that's gut health, things like that. And Starbucks has a lot of different products on its menu that can help consumers kind of leverage these different benefits and these different trends that they're seeking. So this is just kind of a fun example to show how Starbucks is separating itself really beyond just your traditional cup of coffee.
Megan, this company, as big as they are and as old as they are, continues to be lean and agile. They're going to open 2,000 more stores in 2022. Now, a lot of those are going to be international. International is where this company is really struggling. They're doing much better domestically in North America than they are in other parts of the world. So that's where a lot of their focus is going to be. Is your data, because you focus on the U.S., do you get any hints from some of the international notes about what's going on in international? Because it sounds like, even though the labor shortages and the wages are over here, it's still a lot of the problems that they're having in terms of growth is international, Megan. So what are you guys seeing, if anything, from the relationship between North America and the rest of the world?
I think it's a really good point just to touch on, because our data is capturing those English-speaking tweets. So we have really good insight into anyone who is, talking about Starbucks, just how we would talk about Starbucks. And we see momentum in this. I think that this was reflected on our last report. I think that U.S. same-store sales were up something like 22%, whereas China was down, and they got dinged on that pretty significantly. I think China is their second largest market. So this is still a really important piece of the Starbucks puzzle. Our data is definitely going to lend itself more toward those English-speaking, those domestic mentions. So definitely something to keep in mind as we analyze this. But I think this chart is pretty cool. These are these consumer mentions of people who are just talking about purchasing a drink from Starbucks. And what you can see is that we're starting to see this reversal. We're starting to see this demand start to rise again, which is what you want. We're starting to see a lot of trends normalize or show signs of normalization, that consumers are returning to a more normal schedule. I think that Starbucks even called out on its last report that, it started to see its peak hours normalized to the pre-pandemic era. We're seeing these, consumers returning to the office mentions up by about 61% year over year. So we're starting to see consumers settle into a more normal routine. And I think that that is definitely something that will benefit Starbucks long term, but it's definitely just kind of a red flag or just a note that we have whenever we look at our data to say, while we can anticipate the demand from the domestic consumer, it's really, really hard for us to gauge what that recovery looks like in China. So that's something that if there is some signs of that recovery in China, or if they can speak to some type of, positive normalization in those trends, I think it will be really, really well received.
Yeah, and, Megan, and I did notice that the Starbucks, the full company consumer purchase intent mentions starting to trend upward, but the stock fell 16% last month. Now, do you guys have any data? Because I think a big thing, big issue for companies like Starbucks and the scale that they have, Kevin talks about that a lot, McDonald's, Starbucks, they have scale, right? But that also means more workers, and the wages are going higher, and they're starting to unionize at some of the stores here. Have you seen any data or tweets that maybe is reflective that the stock is going down, even though purchase intent mentions are going up, but they're going to offset each other?
I have seen, we focus mostly on these consumer facing tweets. So, most of the time we're just listening. We really want to capture those mentions of people who are talking about going to Starbucks to get a coffee or, grab breakfast or have a meeting, whatever reason that they're going to Starbucks. But I think that if you start to look at more on the investor side of things, those hashtag mentions, you do see a lot of mentions about inflation just from an investor perspective. Are they able to keep up with, supply chain worries? Are they able to keep up with the rising costs of the products that they're using? These labor shortages, that's definitely significant. I think that that's something that we've talked about on a prior show. But at least from our perspective, we haven't seen those worries trickle into overall levels of consumer happiness for consumers who are actually going to shop at and visit Starbucks. So we actually see the consumer happiness levels are completely flat on a year-over-year basis. So, it's good to see that at least Starbucks is able to provide a consistently, positive experience for those consumers who are shopping in their stores, regardless of what may be going on behind the scenes.
Megan, this medicine ball tea that you gave us some data on, this is impressive in terms of the numbers, but is there any, the growth is crazy, but do you guys have any more data on what this medicine ball is? I mean, obviously it's tea. Obviously there's some type of medicinal purpose for this tea, but what is it exactly? I mean, a Long Island iced tea is not iced tea from Long Island, Megan. Is this going to be something that has something else in it?
Yeah, so I can help you out there. So this is kind of like a mixture of teas. I know that there's green tea involved, which a lot of people are citing for those immune boosting benefits. I know that there's peach tranquility is what it's referred to as. There's some honey. There's mint. And so really, these are all things that Starbucks has already had. And so all they've had to do is, kind of pick from these ingredients that are already on their shelves and put it in a drink and then watch demand explode. So this is, I think, just a really cool example of how Starbucks is able to leverage these specialty drinks that really are they that specialty, but it helps to drive that average ticket price higher. I think in the last quarter, their average ticket price increased by about 3%. So a lot of these these specialty and these niche drinks is really what we see bringing more and more consumers to the table. And another interesting just tidbit, whenever you look at, if you were to look at Google Trends on medicine ball tea, the top 4 associated related breakout trends with medicine ball tea all had to do with Starbucks, this in the Starbucks app. So how do I order this on the Starbucks app? Things of that nature. So I think it's really interesting that Starbucks is the first place that consumers are turning to whenever a trend like this takes off. That shows that they're definitely top of mind. And just in general, those overall app usage mentions that we're tracking are up by about 14% year over year. So this is just an example of how these different types of menu items and these trends can help to drive usage and help bring customers in the door for Starbucks.
Yeah, and that average ticket price continues to go higher because they have pricing power. It seems like anytime there's a price hike here, the consumer absorbs it, Megan. But when you look at your data points based on that, going into earnings, what kind of score are you guys giving Starbucks? Because stock's still under pressure today.
Yeah, so we're not as positive on Starbucks as we were about UPS yesterday. I think our earnings score comes out to be about 16, which is technically for us neutral. I think that, we are starting to see that momentum, especially in that English and domestic-based consumer. So we like that. We like to see that this normalization is occurring, but just, we're cautiously. We're neutral, if anything, with a cautious bullish lean, but we also really have to point out that we don't know necessarily what's happening in China. So that's definitely a risk consideration that investors should just take into consideration.
Yeah, so neutral. And China last quarter was down 7%. So we'll see if that carries over into this report, because that definitely did hurt the earnings report last time. All right, Megan, thanks as always for the great stuff, and happy birthday. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, that's Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio.com.